Okay. The next topic is water treatment and plant design in terms of coagulation, introduction of the water treatment as well as the coagulation, which is the basic or very first unit of the water treatment. We would be discussing the coagulation and its basic types, and later on we would be designing the coagulation tank as well as the coagulation dosages. Wash basin above flush tank. What an innovative idea! Will help save gallons of water. Very common in Japan, and almost all restaurants have this idea. Yeah, आप it's just a simple example of conserving the water and uh, reusing the water. In fact, it must be like in that category कि आप इस water को reuse कर रहे हैं for flushing, rather to use the fresh water or or deplete the fresh water resource unnecessarily. And if it is being practiced across the globe, तो आप अंदाज़ा लगा सकते हैं कि how much water is being flushed away in an unnecessarily manner. और जबकि we have an opportunity to conserve or save the water. So these are simple things but very effective in terms of the natural resource conservation. We must keep such things in mind, and we must promote such things. So coming back to our topic, importance of water is, it is like looking at water, you might think that it's the most simple thing around you, and it is being common doesn't make it non-important. Pure water is colorless, odorless, and tasteless, but it's not all the simple and plain, and it is a vital for all life on earth. Where there is water, there is life, and where water is scarce, life has to struggle over there. So overall, we can say that the water is life. So what is it about water that makes it so important to humans? Water is of major importance to all living things. Up to 60% of a human body is water. Therefore, the quality of water we drink is very important. The drinking water should be totally clean, pure, and free of any disease causing microbes, and that's why it should be properly treated and disinfected before using it for drinking purposes. So when we talk about the water for drinking purposes, we must know about the water resources, or the bodies which are providing water for drinking purposes. The various sources of water can be classified into two categories. First one is the surface water, and the second one is subsurface or groundwater. Surface water includes ponds and lakes, streams and rivers, storage reservoirs, and oceans, generally not used for water supply at present, but in some regions of the world, like in UAE, you can see that they are utilizing the ocean water for the drinking purposes after its treatment. So that is the most advanced method of water treatment, and they call it desalination. We would be discussing after the completion of all the water treatment processes and designing. We would be discussing different examples and treatment technologies as well. Then comes the underground water resources like springs, infiltration wells, well and tube wells. A source of water may look like this as well. There might be some organic contamination in that water. There might be some algae and fungi due to the eutrophication, and if we conduct a reverse engineering in the water body, we may come to know that there were some organic materials which were added to the water body, and those caused the eutrophication process, and that eutrophication process has occurred as a result of that algae and fungi has grown up in the water source, and now the water from this source had to be utilized as drinking water or the potable water in different societies. So what would be the point of using this water directly as drinking water or as potable water? There must be a unit between the consumer and the source of water, which make or which convert or which purify this water into the desired product. So that is the water treatment. That's why we are like discussing this topic. We are discussing or having this course, and we have to treat this type of water into the safe drinking water. It must be purified enough so that all the living things can utilize it efficiently, and the water must not be harmful to the consumers, and there must be some processes and infrastructures in place to convert this quality to the best quality for drinking purposes or for other domestic uses. Then comes the self purification of water as well. If we do not have a treatment plant, water itself has an ability to purify itself. How it purifies it has been discussed in this paragraph. When sewage added to a river, like sewage is a pollution and river is a fresh water body, and both when mixed, the pollution is being added to the fresh water, and pollution followed by purification. Purification, how does purification occur in the river? The process in which the quality of the water return towards the normal. When purification occurs without human intervention, it is called as the self purification and occurs as a result of microbiological, chemical and physical changes. अब ये देखें, ये तीनों रिएक्शंस जो हैं ये आप भी यूज़ करते हैं वाटर ट्रीटमेंट प्लांट पे, लेकिन विदाउट ह्यूमन इंटरवेंशन अगर ये ऑकर कर रहे हैं, दैट मीन्स कि दीज आर द सेल्फ प्योरिफिकेशन प्रॉपर्टी और करेक्टरिस्टिक. Microbiological changes include the death of many intestinal microorganisms present in the sewage and growth of normal aquatic microorganisms able to oxidize organic matter entering the system. बायोलॉजिकल प्रोसेस हमने कहा था कि इसमें आकर करता है खुद ब खुद. तो बाय द टाइम रिवर में वाटर जो है वो मूव करता है, तो जो उसमें आपने सीवेज के थ्रू इंटेस्टाइनल माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिजम्स उसमें आपने ऐड कर दिए थे, दोज माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिज्म विद द पैसेज ऑफ टाइम एंड ड्यू टू द अनअवेलेबिलिटी ऑफ डिजायर फूड एंड अदर कंडीशंस डाई ऑफ हो जाते हैं, and at the same time due to the new conditions the useful microorganisms are like regenerated, और उनकी वजह से फिर आपका जो ऑलरेडी सीवेज की वजह से जो प्रेजेंट था ऑर्गेनिक मैटर वो भी डिक्रीज होना शुरू हो जाता है, डिकम्पोज होना स्टार्ट हो जाता है. देन कम्स द केमिकल चेंजेस. Chemical changes include oxidation of organic matter, the release of phosphate, nitrate, and reoxygenation of the water by the oxygen solution from the air. The most important physical changes involve sedimentation, in which particulate matter settle out of the water onto the bottom of the water course. तो अब ये तीनों प्रोसेसेस जो हैं, फिजिकल में सेटलिंग हो गई, केमिकल में उसमें केमिकल चेंजेस आ गई, बायोलॉजिकल में आपने माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिजम्स को जो हैजर्डियस थे या डेंजरस थे या पोटेंशियल रखते थे हेल्थ इम्पैक्ट्स का, वो डाई ऑफ हो गए. बट these three processes have been like occurring due to the self purification of water, self purification property of water, and without human intervention or involvement. That's why it is called as self purification of water. Now, what's the point of treating water while it has the self purification property of treating itself or purifying itself? तो अब ज़रूरत क्या पड़ी कि हम इसको ट्रीट करें? मतलब अगर ये इसके अंदर इतनी एबिलिटी है और देयर इज अ नेचुरल प्रॉपर्टी ऑफ वाटर टू ट्रीट इटसेल्फ और प्योरीफाई इटसेल्फ, then why we are discussing all these things to purify the water or make arrangements for the construction of the water treatment plant and designing the processes which are going to be practiced at that water treatment plant. So the point is that with the passage of time, we have been like the population has increased many folds, and there is an exponential growth in the population around the globe. And the with the increase in huge increase in population, there is a dire need of fulfilling their basic utility needs in terms of water consumption. So they require a higher amount or higher quantity of water to consume for their daily purposes. That's why the rivers and the other water bodies which are running across the countries or across the towns are not enough to make the treated water available for all the community. That's why we have to store water, we have to treat it, and then we have to fulfill our needs. So you can see that if the water is stagnant in some body, like we do in water treatment plant, or in some dams or in some other reservoirs, when water is stagnant, then the self purification property of water acts very slowly. It is present over there, but it acts very slowly. But the requirement of water is on urgent basis. They need it on daily basis and in a very huge quantity. That's why there must be some mechanism in between that can convert that stagnant water into the purified water, and that can be readily available for the population to use for their daily domestic purposes. So that's why it is the need of the hour, and we must promote and we must learn how to treat the water, and we must use the safe drinking water for drinking purposes, because there are a lot of diseases which already have been discussed in the previous lectures, which occur due to the water consumption, either by waterborne diseases, water washed diseases, or water related diseases. There are many types of very dangerous diseases. So we must treat water, and the water treatment is a mandatory thing prior to the consumption of water if the water is polluted or not up to the standard. If we have to treat the water, then there must be some bench scale for the identification of its quality. So water quality, then comes the water quality in place. The raw or treated water is analyzed by testing various parameters. Some of the those parameters are physical, some are chemical, and some are biological. It is on the same pattern in which we discuss the basic properties of self purification of water in terms of physical, chemical, and biological. Physical characteristics, there are many physical characteristics, but few of those have been listed over here in terms of turbidity, color, taste, odor, and temperature, etc. In terms of chemical characteristics, there must be a check on pH, acidity, alkalinity, hardness, chlorides, sulfates, iron, solids, and nitrates. Then comes the biological characteristic which must be taken care of. Bacterial examination of water is very important. Here we have written the bacteria instead of writing all the types of bacteria. And along with this statement, you must know that this property in each drinking water must be zero. There is no value for the standard or the quality of the water in terms of biological characteristics or biological parameter. It must be zero. There is no possibility of having a microorganism in drinking water. If there is even 0.0001% of microorganisms in a drinking water sample, it is not safe for the drinking purposes. It must be treated, it must be purified, and the concentration, which is almost 0.0001%, must be removed from that water, and after removing that water it can be considered as the safe drinking water for potable purposes or drinking purposes. So one thing is clear, that there might be a value of 7 having pH of 7, having turbidity of 1 or below 1, having some value of color, having some ambient temperature 20 to 25 degrees, having some hardness value, having some alkalinity value, sulfate, chlorides. There will be a value of each chemical and physical parameter, but in terms of biological parameter, there must be zero microorganisms in drinking water sample. Bacterial examination of water is very important since it indicates the degree of pollution. Water polluted by sewage contains one or more species of disease producing pathogenic bacteria. Pathogenic organisms cause waterborne diseases, and many non-pathogenic bacteria such as E. coli, a member of coliform group, also live in the intestinal tract of human beings. Coliform itself is not a harmful group, but it has more resistance to adverse conditions than any other group. So if it is ensured to minimize the number of coliforms, the harmful species will be very less. So coliform group serves as indicator of contamination of water with sewage and presence of pathogens. मैं थोड़ा सा इसको एलेबोरेट भी कर दूं कि ह्यूमन बॉडी के अंदर पैथोजेनिक माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिजम्स जो हैं वो हो सकते हैं ड्यू टू सम फूड चेन्स डिस्टर्बेंस, तो उसमें पैथोजेनिक बैक्टीरिया भी हो सकते हैं और उससे वो मूव कर सकते हैं टुवर्ड्स द वाटर बॉडी। और वाटर बॉडी को जो वाटर क्वालिटी की हमने यहाँ पे बात की है ना, तो यहाँ फिजिकल एंड केमिकल क्वालिटी के अगेंस्ट व्हेन यू चेक अबाउट द बायोलॉजिकल quality of the water, then you must have a check of E. coli, which is Escherichia coli microorganism का नाम है ये। एंड कॉलीफॉर्म बैक्टीरिया जो हैं ये बहुत ज़्यादा रेजिस्टेंट होते हैं। दीज कैन सस्टेन देमसेल्फ इन एनी कंडीशन, मतलब जब आप इसके अंदर कोई केमिकल ऐड कर रहे हैं, डिसइंफेक्टेंट ऐड कर रहे हैं कि माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिजम्स मर जाएं या इसमें से डाई ऑफ हो जाएं, तो इसका मतलब ये है कि आप उनके लिए एडवर्स कंडीशन डेवलप कर रहे हैं। ठीक है, when you are providing or making some conditions which are not favorable in terms of microorganisms life, तो उसमें जो सबसे ज्यादा हार्डेस्ट टाइम को बर्दाश्त करने वाला माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिज्म है वो कॉलीफॉर्म है। ठीक है, तो आप कहते हैं कि हम कॉलीफॉर्म को भी जीरो करेंगे, although it is not that much harmful as compared to the other pathogenic microorganisms, but you have to make sure that the coliforms are zero, because if the coliforms are zero, then there won't be any microorganism which can sustain against that disinfectant. सबसे ज्यादा पावरफुल बैक्टीरिया जो है, जो रेजिस्ट करता है, जो बर्दाश्त करता है, जो अपने आप को सस्टेन करता है, दैट इज कॉलीफॉर्म, बट इट इज नॉट दैट मच डेंजरस। हमारे लिए ये इंडिकेटर बन जाता है, हमारे लिए ये एक स्टैंडर्ड बन जाता है। वी कंसीडर कॉलीफॉर्म एज एन इंडिकेटर because if it can be removed, then any bacteria can be removed from that water sample through that disinfection process. So it's an indicator, and we must make sure that the value of coliforms in any water sample is zero, then it would be considered as a safe drinking water sample. तो ये आप एक चीज और ऐड कर लें, आफ्टर सेल्फ प्योरिफिकेशन ऑफ वाटर देयर इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग इन टर्म्स ऑफ वाटर ट्रीटमेंट के बैक्टीरियोलॉजिकल कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स में कॉलीफॉर्म का क्या रोल है, और हम सिर्फ इतने बैक्टीरिया को छोड़ के सिर्फ E. coli को क्यों, व्हाई वी आर टेस्टिंग E. coli ओनली, why we are analyzing the presence or absence of E. coli only or coliform bacteria only. तो कॉलीफॉर्म जो है वो ग्रुप है और E. coli उसके अंदर एक स्पीशी है। जैसे हमारा जो एक वो लिविंग लिविंग थिंग्स का एक वो एक स्पीशी है और एक उसके अंदर फिर एक पूरा ग्रुप होता है। तो इसी तरह से इनका एक ग्रुप है और उसमें स्पीशी जो है वो इक्वलाई है। इक्वलाई ही हम क्यों चेक करते हैं? बिकॉज इट इज द मोस्ट रेजिस्टेंट माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिजम्स इन एनी वाटर सैंपल अगेंस्ट एनी डिसइंफेक्टेंट, and if it is not present in any sample, then there cannot be a single microorganism which can be present in the water sample after the addition or application of the disinfectant. Bacteriological characteristics में how do we measure these or identify or detect these microorganisms in any water sample are standard plate count method, most probable number technique, membrane filtration technique. These are few processes, some of the advanced processes which are very authentic and being utilized in different laboratories in terms of calculating the number of microorganisms present in a water sample and making yourself understand that it is contamination free or it is not safe for drinking purposes. When you have discussed the water quality, to maintain or to achieve that water quality, you must treat your water. And the water treatment transforms raw surface and groundwater into safe drinking water. This is the basic, simple, prime objective of water treatment, that it converts the surface or groundwater into safe drinking water. Water treatment involves two major processes: physical removal of solids and chemical disinfection. These are the two major processes which occur into the all these processes. Aim of the treatment processes is the pathogen free water, to obtain chemically safe water without dirt, solid matter, and aesthetically acceptable. And we use national regulation for the calculation of water quality, as well as we follow the WHO guidelines for fulfilling the or for comparing the water sample with some safer limits. Goals of water treatment include comply with the requirements of operating license, meet increasingly strict drinking water quality guidelines, virtually eliminate the risk of waterborne diseases, reduce levels of disinfection byproducts, and significantly improve the taste and odor of the drinking water. At the water treatment plant, treated water sampling point, as we test for routine water chemistry, taste and odor compounds, metals, disinfection byproducts, bacteria, pesticides, herbicides, and PCBs, polychlorobenzenes. So when we analyze the water in laboratory, we must know that there is no virus. We must identify that we must make sure that there is no virus, there is no bacteria, and there are no sediments present in the water sample. When we are discussing the water treatment and its basic objectives in terms of achieving some goals of water treatment, then we must know about water treatment plant as well, because it is the major agent of treating water and achieving all these goals. It is quite similar to solid waste management. In solid waste management, I shared 6 functional elements with you. 6 functional elements with you. Here we have 7 unit operations in which the water has to be purified, and after passing from all these 7 points, water is understood as safe for drinking purposes. What are these 7 points, or what are these 7 stages of water, or what are the 7 functional elements of the water? The first one is, let me make it a little bit easier for you. The first one is intake of water. The second one is chemical addition in the water. The third one is coagulation and flocculation in water. Fourth one is the sedimentation in water. Fifth one is filtration. Sixth one is disinfection. And final is the storage and provision of water to the consumer. So all these 7 aspects or stages are the functional elements of your water treatment plant. Let me introduce yourself with the water treatment plant overview. At intake, water is taken from the water source. It might be surface water, it can be a groundwater source. Logs, fish, and plants are screened out at the intake, and then the water is drawn into the treatment plant. If the source is groundwater, the screening is done by the soil as the water travels under the earth's surface. Sometimes very little treatment is required for groundwater. Obviously, the groundwater is not that much contaminated until unless it is being exposed to some heavy contamination due to some open dumping or some industrial infiltrations. Otherwise, normally the groundwater is considered as the safer drinking water, and it requires very less treatment in terms of making it safer for the drinking purposes. And after that, we have the chemical addition, aluminium sulfate. That's why we discussed the chemical reactions and chemical reactors as well in the previous discussion. Aluminium sulfate, which is commonly known as alum, polymers, and other or chlorine are added into the water. These kill germs, improve taste and odor, and they help settle solids still in the water. The water and these chemicals are then mixed together. All these chemicals, when mixed in water in an optimized way, are not as much harmful as the agents for which these chemicals were added. All right. When these chemicals are added, the agents which were dangerous or hazardous for the health purposes, those are removed or destroyed from the water, and the remaining chemicals which were added by yourself remain in the water and mixed with the water, and their quantity is optimized so that they cannot cause any harmful effect on the human body later on when it is being used as domestic purposes. Then comes the coagulation and flocculation. Here, the alum and other chemicals from the chemical addition step cling to particles in the water. This is called coagulation. It causes particles to stick together and form larger particles called as flock. तो coagulation and flocculation में आप chemical add करते हैं, rapid mixing करते हैं, that is called as coagulation. स्लो मिक्सिंग करते हैं और जो आपके पार्टिकल्स हैं उनको आप कॉन्ग्रीगेट करते हैं, इंटीग्रेट करते हैं, एग्लोमिरेट करते हैं, इकट्ठा करते हैं, जॉइन टुगेदर करते हैं, and they become larger particles. These larger particles are called as flocks, and these flocks are later on settled down by the force of gravity, and after the settling of these flocks, your water is relatively clear or purified in terms of the suspended solids. Sedimentation is the process in which you settle down those flocks which were generated in the previous step. The water and the flock particles flow into a sedimentation basin. Here the flock settles to the bottom and is removed from the water. Then comes the filtration. After the removal of physical pollution or physical contamination or the suspended solids through the process of coagulation, flocculation and sedimentation, you must filter the water for the remaining part of the colloidal particles, and these colloidal particles were small enough not to settle down in the given time at the sedimentation tank, and now they have to be removed from the system in terms of making the water further purified. From the sedimentation basin, the water flows through filters, and the filters may meet layers of sand and gravel. The filters are used to remove any remaining particles left in the water. Disinfection is the process in which the microorganisms which were present and escaped from coagulation, flocculation, sedimentation and filtration process. Now those were the agents which can cause the health problem in human body. We already have discussed that there must not be a single microorganism present in the water sample after the treatment. So after passing the water from all these processes, if the microorganisms are escaped or have reached to this point, then we add some disinfectant, and we destroy or inhibit the microorganisms so that those cannot cause any diseases in the consumer. Disinfection, a small amount of chlorine or other disinfecting chemicals is added. This is used to kill any remaining germs and to keep the water safe as it travels to the public. In some water systems, especially those with groundwater source, this is the only treatment provided. Then comes the storage, which is quite simple, that the water is placed in a closed tank or reservoir called a clear well. This allows time for the chlorine to mix throughout the water in order to for disinfection to take place. The water then flows into the distribution system. The water is sampled and tested throughout the treatment plant. Sampling is performed to make sure the processes are working and that the water is safe before it leaves the treatment plant. Let me take an opportunity to explain all these steps once again so that you may understand the overview of the water treatment plant, and later on we can discuss all these phases in detail, and we can also design the processes of water treatment in each step, and also we can design the infrastructure for the relevant requirement of each step. सबसे पहले इनटेक है हमारे पास. इनटेक में आपके पास वाटर आता है, तो उसके अंदर जितनी भी लार्जर पार्टिकल्स हैं, लीव्स हैं, कोई उसमें स्टिक आ रही है, कोई और चीज़ें आ रही हैं, कुछ भी जो आपको नेकेड आई से नज़र आ रही हैं चीज़ें, आप उनको इनटेक पे रिमूव कर लेते हैं. देन कम्स द केमिकल एडिशन एंड कोगुलेशन एंड फ्लॉकुलेशन. ये दोनों स्टेप एक ही हैं कि आप इसमें ये वाले केमिकल्स ऐड करते हैं. इसको आप प्री ट्रीटमेंट भी कह सकते हैं और प्राइमरी ट्रीटमेंट भी कह सकते हैं. और इसमें जब आप इसको इन चीज़ों को ऐड करते हैं तो इसकी वजह से जो जितनी भी फिजिकल उसमें प्रॉपर्टीज़ थी, उसके अंदर सस्पेंडेड पार्टिकल्स वगैरह थे, वो सारे रिमूव हो जाते हैं. और रिमूव क्या, फ्लॉक्स में डेवलप हो जाते हैं, लार्जर पार्टिकल्स में कन्वर्ट हो जाते हैं. वो कैसे होते हैं वो डिटेल में हम आगे पढ़ेंगे. देन कम्स द सेडिमेंटेशन. जब ये आपने लार्जर पार्टिकल्स डेवलप करवा लिए हैं पिछले प्रोसेस में, तो आप सेडिमेंटेशन में इनको सेटल डाउन करवा लेते हैं. ये नीचे इनको आप मतलब सिस्टम से रिमूव करने के लिए इनको सेटल डाउन करवाते हैं. उसके बाद फिल्ट्रेशन है. फिल्ट्रेशन में आप ग्रेवल सैंड की लेयर्स बना लेते हैं और सारे का सारा पानी उसमें से गुजारते हैं, तो उसमें जितने भी पार्टिकल्स जो सेटल डाउन नहीं हो रहे थे वो सारे के सारे उसमें फिल्टर हो जाते हैं. उसके बाद भी अगर पानी में कोई चीज़ हो, माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिजम्स वगैरह, तो उसको आप डिसइंफेक्शन करते हैं. डिसइंफेक्शन के लिए नॉर्मली क्लोरीन यूज़ की जाती है और इसके थ्रू हम उन माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिजम्स को किल ऑफ कर देते हैं. जब ये भी हो जाती है तो उसके बाद हम वाटर को स्टोर करते हैं। इसमें जो क्लोरीन मिक्स थी उसको और ज़्यादा टाइम मिल जाता है ड्यूरिंग द स्टोरेज के, वो अच्छी तरह से इफेक्टिवली मिक्स हो जाए पूरे वाटर में। और जब वो मिक्स होती है तो पूरे वाटर में से फर्दर वो जो माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिजम्स हैं उनकी प्रेजेंस जो है उसको रिमूव कर देती है, और इसी तरह से आप उसको डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन नेटवर्क की तरफ भेज देते हैं आफ्टर टेस्टिंग दैट इट इज़ सेफर फॉर द ड्रिंकिंग पर्पजेज। अब आपने ये सात सब स्टेप पढ़े हैं, तो इन सातों स्टेप के ऊपर आप वाटर को टेस्ट करते हैं, ट्रीट करते हैं। तो हर स्टेप के बाद इसको टेस्ट करते हैं कि क्या हमारा ये स्टेप एफिशिएंटली काम कर रहा है या नहीं कर रहा। एंड लेटर ऑन आप एक क्यूमुलेटिव उसकी एफिशिएंसी भी चेक कर लेते हैं कि इन स्टार्ट में हमारे पास फॉर एग्जांपल 300 मिलीग्राम्स 1 लीटर में थे हमारे पास सस्पेंडेड सॉलिड्स, और अब हमने जब एट द एंड ऑफ द डे देखा तो हमारे पास 10 मिलीग्राम्स पर लीटर है आउट ऑफ दैट 300। तो 290 मिलीग्राम्स पर लीटर हैव बीन रिमूव्ड बाय दिस सिस्टम। तो उससे आपको इसकी एफिशिएंसी का पता चल जाता है। That's why we use water treatment in terms of purifying the water for making it safer for the drinking purposes. All these steps which have been discussed over here, वो यहाँ पे आपको शो भी किए गए। We have intake from any source of water, and after that we have a chemical addition process. Then comes the coagulation and sedimentation, coagulation, flocculation, followed by the sedimentation tank. Then comes the filtration process, and after filtration we disinfect the water, and after disinfection we store the water as a final unit. And after this final unit we make sure that this water is safe for drinking purposes, and we send this water to the distribution line, which is the consumer and or the ultimate user of that treated water. And at the tap, or we must make sure that at tap the water must be safe for drinking purposes. दैट मीन्स कि अगर आपने ये सारे प्लांट पे यू हैव पुट एक्स्ट्रा एफर्ट टू ट्रीट द वाटर, एंड योर डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन नेटवर्क इज कंटामिनेटेड और इज नॉट मेंटेन्ड efficiently, then your water may come across against the pollution or the contamination which is being added or being infiltrated through this distribution network. तो सिर्फ ऐसा नहीं है कि आपने कहीं संगजानी में बैठ के वाटर को ट्रीट कर लिया और बाद में जब आप उसको I8 में जाके डिलीवर करते हैं, F6 में डिलीवर करते हैं कंज्यूमर के लिए, तो वहां तक जाते जाते वो सारे का सारा फिर से कंटामिनेट हो गया। तो आपको डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन नेटवर्क की एश्योरेंस भी देनी होगी कि ये सेफर है फॉर दी वाटर डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन, और इसमें कोई इनफिल्ट्रेशन नहीं हो रही कहीं से सीवेज की, कहीं से और कंटामिनेशन की। और इसमें से पास करने के बाद भी वाटर हमारा ट्रीटेड ही रहेगा, सेफर रहेगा, और उसको आप यूटिलाइज कर सकते हैं, रादर कि आपका डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन नेटवर्क टोटली कोलैप्स्ड हो और आप पीछे इतनी ज़्यादा एक्सपेंडिचर्स एंड एफर्ट्स जो है वैसे ही लगा रहे हो, क्योंकि आगे तो आपका वाटर जो है वो कंटामिनेट हो के ही जाना है ना कंज्यूमर की तरफ। तो इसलिए आपका ये एक इम्पॉर्टेंट पैरामीटर है। System which connects the treated water with the consumer must be healthy, must be safe from all the possible exposure of contamination. This is another view of this, basically the animated view of the treatment plant, and all these parameters were like all these parameters. I don't know if I convert it to the full screen, it is be used visible to you or not. Can you see the full screen, Anwar? Can you see the
Yes,
full screen, Anwar?
Yes, sir.
Can you see the moving parts of the treatment plant as well?
Yes, sir.
yes, sir.
Then why? मैं ऐसे ही फिर इसको वो स्मॉल स्क्रीन पे रख के चला रहा था। यहाँ पे आप इजीली देख सकते हैं कि ऑल दी फिजिकल पैरामीटर्स कैन बी रिमूव्ड टेक थ्रू सम स्क्रीनिंग. After that, the chemicals are being added and mixing is in process at this stage. Then there are flocks, and then these flocks are being settled down in sedimentation tank and followed by the removal of these flocks from the sedimentation's bottom. Then the clear water is being sent to the filtration process. After passing these through these filters, the water is being sent to the disinfection process, and then it is being stored at an elevated level, and then it is being sent to the consumer end as well. So it's a complete chain of different activities which are being utilized to make the water much safer for drinking purposes. I believe the full screen is still visible to you.
Yes, sir.
All right. Then there are some basic practical works. I am in contact with VASA. I have requested them to provide me some data so that I can arrange something for you guys. And I hope for the best कि अगर वो मुझे कुछ चीज़ें शेयर कर देते हैं तो I would be discussing those things with you और आपके साथ वो शेयर करूँगा on actual basis basically हो क्या रहा है water treatment के point of view से यहाँ पे. But before entering into that phase, as we are discussing the basic introduction of the water treatment and the importance of water treatment, so that we may convince ourselves that the water treatment is a mandatory thing, we must know the different departments and the different activities of various departments at a water treatment facility. All right. There must be various departments at a single water treatment facility. It's a full-fledged, a complete sector in which various departments are mandatory. The planning department, which is the foremost department, and it must be established before the construction of water treatment facility. And the planning department plans for the growth in services being provided by the treatment facility. The commercial and customer care department handles the queries and complaints from the commercial and domestic customers. The engineering department is responsible for major engineering works such as refurbishment or expansion of the facility. The corporate affairs department takes care of public relations and communication such as publicity campaigns to encourage efficient use of water. The rural water supply department ensures that water supply is extended to cover the rural population. The operation and maintenance department ensures the smooth running of the water treatment and supply system. This is the basic task of environmental engineer, that an environmental engineer must operate the treatment plant and must optimize the processes which are being conducted in terms of coagulation, flocculation, sedimentation, filtration, and followed by the disinfection and storage. These processes are optimized by an environmental engineer, and he knows the processes and he knows the chemistry of all these stages, and he has to optimize all these stages so that the treatment plant works very efficiently and all the allied departments are in satisfaction that yes, we are working at a plant which is being monitored by an environmental engineer, as well as which is being and which is operated at a very optimum efficiency. The water quality assurance department monitors the quality of delivered water to ensure that it is up to the standard. Once again, it is the department which must be headed by the environmental engineer, because an environmental engineer knows that how to analyze and test the water parameters, and how to identify that if there is a problem in the water treatment. The human resource management department recruits and trains the staff. The finance department arranges the finances and revenues for the water supply and utilities budget as well. Finally, if relevant, the sewage department looks after the sewer network and sewerage treatment. और अगर इसके साथ वेस्ट वाटर ट्रीटमेंट प्लांट का भी अगर आपके पास सेक्शन है जो कि एक ही जगह पे होना चाहिए, सो दैट दे कैन प्लान देयर लाइंस एंड डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन एंड कलेक्शन नेटवर्क्स अकॉर्डिंगली इन अ सिटी, और उसके हिसाब से वो इसको मूव करें तो ज़्यादा बेटर होगा. These are some pictorial views of a treatment plant in terms of its PLC operation. This is the construction and maintenance work being done at water treatment plants distribution, or the lines which are making sure the water is moving from one place to another. Then there are some daily tasks in running a water treatment plant. For example, check water meter readings and record water production. Check and record water levels in storage tanks. Check chemical solution tanks and record amounts being used. Inspect chemical feed pumps. Check and record residual chlorine at the chlorine contact tank and in the distribution system. Inspect inlet pumps, motors and controls. Record inlet pump running times and pump cycle starts. Complete a daily security check. ये सारे environmental engineer के almost काम हैं. The schedule for these tasks is spread throughout the year, with some collected for January, some for Feb. So all these activities must be spread on the monthly or quarterly basis routine, so that the workload is managed sensibly. Some of these tasks may need to be completed 3 or 4 times a year. Overhaul chemical feed pumps, inspect and clean chemical feed lines and solution tanks, calibrate chemical feed pumps. Annual tasks in running a water treatment plant. These are not daily or the quarterly tasks, but the annual task. Operate all valves inside the treatment plant and pump house. Maintain log continuously throughout the year. Review emergency response plans. Inspect chemical safety equipment and repair or replace. Inspect, clean and repair control panels in pump house and treatment plants. Inspect storage tanks for defects and deficiencies and clean if necessary. Flush the distribution system and exercise or check all fire hydrant valves. Perform preventive maintenance on treatment plant and pump house buildings. So all these things were about the introduction to the water treatment, and now we have to move towards the coagulation and its basic introduction.